On Saturday at 10 a.m., 32-year-old Jared Wilson, the founder of the chain of stores, shed his CEO's suit and put on an old jacket. He went to his first store in Texas as a regular customer to see if his values were still alive. But what he saw, blatant discrimination and disrespect, shattered his illusions. One visit turned everything around, and now justice demanded action. The sun was climbing high over suburban Dallas on Saturday, March 21st, 2025, casting a harsh glare across the sprawling parking lot of Wilson Home Goods. At exactly 10:03 a.m., Jared Wilson pulled his beat-up Ford pickup into a spot near the back, far from the shiny SUVs and minivans clustered closer to the entrance. He killed the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at the store he'd built from nothing. At 32, Jared was the kind of guy you'd expect to see in a boardroom, not behind the wheel of a rusting truck. But today, he wasn't the CEO of a multi-million-dollar retail chain. He was just another face in the crowd, dressed in faded jeans, a worn-out hoodie, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. The man in the rearview mirror was a stranger. No trace of the polished entrepreneur who'd turned a single store into an empire. Today, Jared was shedding his title, stepping into the world he'd created to see if it still held the values he'd poured his soul into. This wasn't just any location. The Dallas store was his first big leap, a gamble he'd taken 8 years ago when he was a 24-year-old dreamer with more grit than cash. Back then, he'd handpicked every employee, trained them himself, and drilled into them his core belief. Every customer matters, no matter who they are. That promise had carried him far. Wilson Home Goods now dotted the map across Texas and beyond, a testament to his vision of fairness and connection. But lately, whispers had reached his downtown office. Complaints of rude staff, cold service, and something uglier, bias. Customers leaving with a bad taste, feeling dismissed or judged. If it was true, Jared needed to know. Not from a report or a manager's polished summary, but with his own eyes as a nobody walking through those automatic doors. He adjusted the cap, tugging it down to shade his face, and grabbed a scuffed canvas tote from the passenger seat, just the kind of bag a regular guy might sling over his shoulder. His heart thudded with a mix of anticipation and dread as he stepped out into the heat. The asphalt radiated warmth through his sneakers, and a faint breeze carried the hum of traffic from the nearby highway. Jared locked the truck and started toward the store, his strides deliberate but casual. The bold blue and white logo gleamed above the entrance, a sight that usually swelled his chest with pride. Today, though, that pride was edged with unease. What if the soul of his company, the warmth, the respect, had slipped away while he'd been busy signing deals and cutting ribbons? The automatic doors whooshed open, and a blast of cool air hit him as he crossed the threshold. Inside, the store buzzed with Saturday morning energy. Shoppers weaved through aisles, their carts piled with towels, gadgets, and kitchenware. A kid's laugh echoed from somewhere near the toy section, sharp and fleeting. Employees in striped navy vests moved with purpose, some stocking shelves, others ringing up purchases at the registers. To anyone else, it might have looked like a well-oiled machine. But Jared wasn't here for a quick glance. He was here to peel back the surface, to see what simmered underneath. He paused near a display of sleek coffee makers, pretending to study the price tags while his eyes scanned the room. A young woman in a vest chatted with a customer a few feet away, her tone bright as she explained wattage and warranties. Nearby, a stock clerk rearranged a tower of mixing bowls, his movements quick but mechanical, like he was on autopilot. Then at the far end of the store, Jared spotted him, a lanky guy in his early 20s, leaning against the electronics counter, thumb scrolling lazily across his phone. No customers around him, no urgency in his posture. "Ja, let's go tightened." That was his first stop. He wove through the aisles, keeping his pace slow, blending into the flow of shoppers. When he reached the electronics section, he picked up a pair of wireless earbuds, turning them over in his hands as if weighing a purchase. It was a simple move, the kind that should have drawn a greeting or an offer to help. But the guy, his name tag read Tyler, didn't budge. Didn't even look up. Jared lingered, giving him a chance. 10 seconds. 20. Nothing. Tyler's eyes stayed glued to his screen, a faint smirk tugging at his lips, as if whatever he was watching mattered more than the store around him. Jared set the earbuds down, a quiet thud against the counter. Still nothing. The knot in his stomach tightened, but he wasn't ready to call it yet. Maybe Tyler was distracted. Maybe it was a fluke. He stepped back, melting into the crowd, and decided to keep watching. He'd come here for the truth, however messy it might be, and he wasn't leaving until he had it. What Jared didn't know yet was that this was just the first crack in a foundation he'd thought was rock solid, and the next few minutes would shatter it completely. Jared Wilson stood in the electronics aisle of Wilson Home Goods, the faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The pair of wireless earbuds sat back on the shelf, untouched by Tyler, the slouched employee who hadn't spared him a glance. Jared's pulse ticked up a notch, but he kept his cool. One bad interaction didn't mean the whole store was rotten. He needed more, proof that this was an outlier, or worse, a pattern. Shoving his hands into the pockets of his hoodie, he drifted away from the counter, letting the crowd swallow him up. His eyes darted around, taking mental notes. The Dallas store still felt alive, carts rattling, voices overlapping. But beneath the surface, something gnawed at him. He was here to test his company's soul, and Tyler's indifference was a crack he couldn't ignore. He wandered toward the home goods section, weaving past a pyramid of discounted throw pillows. An older woman stood there, frowning at a stack of frying pans, her gray hair spilling out from under a knit cap. She looked lost, glancing around for help. Jared slowed, curious to see how this played out. Before he could decide whether to step in, a young employee, her vest pinned with a Kayla name tag, bounced over with a smile. "Need a hand with those?" she asked, her voice warm. The woman's shoulders relaxed as Kayla pulled down a pan, explaining its non-stick coating with easy confidence. Jared nodded to himself. That was the kind of service he'd dreamed of, attentive, human. Maybe Tyler was just a fluke, but the flicker of hope didn't last. Jared turned back toward the electronics counter, determined to give Tyler one more shot. This time, he grabbed a boxed Bluetooth speaker from the display, a hefty, high-end model, and carried it to the counter. He set it down with a soft thud, loud enough to demand attention. Tyler finally looked up, his hazel eyes narrowing slightly, like Jared had interrupted something important. "Can I help you?" he muttered, his tone flat, almost daring Jared to say yes. Jared forced a casual smile, keeping his voice light. "Yeah, I'm wondering if this is good for outdoor use. Like, will it hold up in the heat?" Tyler flicked his gaze to the box, then shrugged. "Dunno. Probably." He tapped his phone screen, already checking out the conversation. Jared's jaw tightened, but he pressed on. "Could you check? I like to be sure before I drop $100. Tyler let out a heavy sigh, the kind you'd hear from a kid stuck doing chores. Without a word, he snatched the box, flipped it over, and skimmed the fine print. "Says it's weatherproof," he grumbled, shoving it back across the counter. "There you go." Jared blinked, caught off guard by the sheer dismissiveness. "Okay," he said, steadying his tone. "What about compatibility? Will it sync with most phones?" Tyler rolled his eyes, actually rolled them, and smirked. "Look, man, it's all in the box. Read it yourself. Or grab something else. I don't care." The words hit like a slap, sharp and careless. Jared stood there, the speaker between them, feeling a heat creep up his neck. He wasn't just annoyed, he was stunned. This wasn't laziness. It was contempt. He glanced around, testing a hunch. Across the store, near the front, Tyler's demeanor shifted. A white couple, mid-30s, dressed in crisp polos, approached with a question about a TV. Suddenly, Tyler straightened up, flashing a grin. "Oh, that's a great pick," he said, his voice dripping with enthusiasm. "Let me grab the remote so you can test it out." Jared's stomach twisted. The contrast was glaring. Same guy, same job, but a totally different attitude. Was it the hoodie, the cap, or something else Tyler saw when he looked at him? A black man in worn clothes? Not worth the effort? Jared swallowed the urge to call it out right there. He wasn't here to blow his cover. Not yet. Instead, he picked up the speaker, set it back on the shelf, and stepped away, his mind racing. Tyler's attitude wasn't just a bad day. It felt personal, like a judgment made in a split second. Jared moved toward the clothing section, needing space to process. A young Latina employee, her tag read Marisol, was folding T-shirts, her hands quick and precise. She caught his eye and smiled. "Let me know if you need anything, okay?" Her warmth was genuine, a lifeline in the storm brewing inside him. But then, as he lingered near a rack of jackets, he overheard it, a low, snide exchange that stopped him cold. Two employees, a guy and a girl, leaned against a shelf a few feet away. "That dude over there," the guy muttered, nodding subtly toward Jared. "He's been poking around forever. But he's not buying squat." The girl chuckled. "Yeah, doesn't look like he's got the cash for anything big. Just wasting our time." Jared froze, pretending to check a price tag. The words sliced deeper than Tyler's rudeness. People like him, they'd said. He knew what that meant. He'd heard it before, just not in a place he'd built to prove it wrong. His hands clenched into fists inside his pockets. This wasn't one bad apple. It was a rot he hadn't seen coming, and it was spreading. Jared's heart pounded with a mix of anger and disbelief. He'd come here for the truth, and now it was staring him in the face, uglier than he'd ever imagined. Jared Wilson stood motionless near the jacket rack in Wilson Home Goods, the sting of the employee's words still burning in his ears. People like him never buy anything big. The casual venom in their voices, Andy and Kate, he'd caught from their name tags, echoed louder than the store's ambient chatter. It wasn't just rudeness. It was a gut punch of assumption, a racial jab delivered with the ease of a passing joke. Jared's breath caught, his fingers tightening around the edge of a price tag he wasn't really reading. He'd built this company to be a haven, a place where no one felt small, no matter their skin or their wallet. Yet here, in his own store, that vision was crumbling. He forced himself to move, stepping away from the clothing section before the urge to confront them overwhelmed him. His cover was still intact. He was just a guy in a hoodie, not the CEO, and he needed it to stay that way a little longer. The truth was sinking in, heavy and bitter. This wasn't about Tyler's laziness or a single bad hire. It was a culture gone sour, a rot he'd missed while chasing expansion and profits. Jared's mind raced back to the early days, when he'd handshake every new employee, drilling into them his mantra, treat everyone like family. Had that faded as the stores multiplied? Had he let it slip through his fingers? He drifted toward the checkout area, needing a moment to steady himself. The hum of the store, carts rolling, registers beeping, felt distant, drowned out by the storm in his head. At the counter, a middle-aged black woman with a Marla name tag rang up a customer's pile of dish towels. Her smile was warm, her voice steady as she said, "You're all set. Have a great day." The customer, an older man with a limp, nodded gratefully and shuffled off. Jared watched her work, her professionalism a quiet balm against the ugliness he'd just witnessed. When it was his turn, he stepped up, empty-handed but needing something, anything, to anchor him. "Find everything okay?" Marla asked, her eyes meeting his with a kindness that felt real. Jared hesitated, then shook his head. "Not really," he said, keeping his tone even. "I'm still figuring out what I need." Her smile softened, a flicker of concern crossing her face. "Well, if you change your mind, we're here to help." She meant it, and for a second, Jared felt a spark of hope. Marla was the kind of employee he'd envisioned. Proof his dream wasn't dead. But she was an island in a sea of cracks. He thanked her and stepped aside, lingering near the exit. His eyes swept the store again, piecing together the fragments of his morning. Tyler's dismissiveness, Andy and Kate's sneers, Marisol's warmth, Marla's steady grace. It was a patchwork of extremes. Some employees embodied his values, others mocked them. But why? What had gone wrong? Jared's gaze landed on a framed mission statement hanging near the registers. Every customer matters. Every moment counts. His own words etched in bold print. They mocked him now, a hollow promise in a place where he'd been sized up and discarded. Then came the twist he hadn't seen coming. As he turned to leave, he caught a snippet of conversation from behind the customer service desk. Two voices, hushed but sharp. "That guy's been here too long." One said, male clipped authoritative. He's not buying anything. Probably scoping the place out. The other voice, softer, female, replied, "Yeah, I saw him earlier. Looks sketchy. Should we call in?" Jared's blood ran cold. He glanced over his shoulder, careful not to draw attention. The man was older, late 40s, with a Jack name tag pinned to his vest. Assistant manager, it read. The woman beside him, a cashier, nodded nervously. They were talking about him, not as a customer, but as a threat. Jared's heart pounded, a mix of disbelief and fury surging through him. He'd walked in here as a test, blending into the crowd, but they'd pegged him as trouble. Based on what? His clothes? His race? The way he lingered? He didn't know, but it didn't matter. This wasn't just bias. It was suspicion, the kind that turned a shopper into a suspect. He thought of the stories he'd heard. Friends followed in stores, eyes tracking their every move. He never felt it himself. Not like this, not in a place he owned. Jared forced his feet to move, stepping outside into the blinding Texas sun. The heat hit him like a wall, but it couldn't burn away the chill settling in his bones. He climbed into his truck, slamming the door harder than he meant to, and gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles ached. The mission statement flashed in his mind, a cruel irony. Every customer matters, unless they don't fit the right mold. He'd come here for answers, and he'd gotten them. His store wasn't just failing some people. It was failing him. He pulled a notebook from the glove box, a habit from his scrappy startup days, and scrawled a single line. "This ends now." Jared didn't know how deep the rot went, but he knew one thing. He wasn't walking away. Not from this. Not from them. What he didn't realize yet was that the next step would rip the lid off a truth even uglier than he'd feared. Jared Wilson sat in his truck outside, Wilson Home Goods, the afternoon sun baking the dashboard, but he barely felt it. His notebook lay open on the passenger seat, the words "This ends now" staring back at him in his own jagged scrawl. The morning had peeled back layers of his company he'd never wanted to see. Tyler's contempt, Andy and Kate's sneers, and worst of all, Jack's quiet suspicion that turned him from customer to threat. Each moment replayed in his mind, a reel of betrayal he couldn't unsee. This wasn't just a bad store. It was a betrayal of everything he'd built, a stain on the dream he'd scratched out of nothing. He couldn't sit with it any longer. It was time to step out of the shadows. He shoved the notebook back into the glove box, grabbed his cap, and strode toward the store with a fire in his chest. The automatic doors parted, and the cool air hit him again, but this time it didn't feel welcoming. It felt like a mask, hiding the rot underneath. Jared headed straight for the customer service desk, his steps firm, his hoodie still cloaking his identity. A young cashier glanced up, her eyes widening at his intensity. "I need to speak to the manager," he said, his voice low but unyielding. She nodded, fumbling with the intercom. "Jack to the front, please," she stammered, and Jared waited, arms crossed, the weight of the day pressing down on him. Jack appeared a minute later, his assistant manager vest crisp, his expression a mix of curiosity and wariness. "How can I help you?" he asked, his tone clipped, the same voice Jared had overheard sizing him up as sketchy. Jared took a breath, then extended a hand. "Jared Wilson," he said, watching Jack's face shift from confusion to shock. "I'm the owner of this company." Jack's handshake faltered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Mr. Wilson," he managed, his cheeks flushing red. I didn't know you were." "That's the point," Jared cut in, his voice steady but sharp. "I didn't want you to know. I came here as a customer to see how this place really runs. And what I saw, it's not good." Jack shifted, his eyes darting to the floor. "Can you tell me what happened?" he asked, but there was a tremor in his voice, like he already knew this wasn't a casual chat. Jared didn't hold back. He recounted it all. Tyler's eye-rolling dismissal, the snide comments from Andy and Kate, the way he'd been treated like he didn't belong. Then he leaned in, his tone dropping. "And I overheard you, Jack. You thought I was trouble, didn't you? Just a guy scoping the place out. Tell me why." Jack's face went pale. I didn't mean it like that," he stammered. "We've had theft issues, and you were here a while, so—" Jared held up a hand. "Stop. It's not about excuses. It's about what I felt walking through these doors. Ignored. Judged. Suspected. That's not what this company stands for. Or it's not supposed to. Jack nodded, mute, and Jared straightened. Gather the staff. Now. Break room, 5 minutes. The employees filed in, a mix of confusion and nerves rippling through the group. Tyler slouched near the back, phone still in hand. Andy and Kate hovered by the coffee machine, whispering. Marla stood near the front, her calm presence a quiet anchor. Jared stepped to the center, pulling off his cap, letting them see his face. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the room. "For those who don't know me, I'm Jared Wilson, the founder and CEO of this company. Today, I came here undercover to see what's really going on. And I'm disappointed." He let the word hang, watching their faces, shock, guilt, curiosity. "Some of you treated me with respect, and I'm grateful for that. But others," his eyes flicked to Tyler, then Andy and Kate. "You dismissed me, ignored me, assumed I couldn't afford a damn thing because of how I looked. I heard you talking, people like him don't buy big. You didn't know who I was, and you didn't care. That's not just unprofessional, it's wrong." Tyler's smirk vanished, replaced by a nervous swallow. Andy shifted, his bravado gone. Jared turned to Jack. "And you, thinking I was a thief? That's not vigilance. That's bias. And it stops today." He faced the group again, his voice rising with purpose. "This company was built on one idea. Every customer matters. I don't care who they are, where they're from, or what they're wearing. If you can't live that, you don't belong here." The room was still, the air thick with tension. "Here's what's happening," he continued. "Starting now, every store gets mandatory training. Bias, respect, service. I'll be checking in, unannounced, to make sure it sticks. And I want your input. What's broken, what's working. You'll have a way to speak up. No names needed." He softened, just a fraction. "I'm not here to tear you down. I'm here to fix this. But it starts with accountability, mine too. I let this slide too long, and that's on me." He locked eyes with Marla, who gave a small nod, then scanned the rest. "We can do better. We will. Any questions?" Silence. Then Tyler raised a shaky hand. "Are we fired?" Jared met his gaze, unflinching. "Not yet, but shape up or you're out. That goes for everyone." As they dispersed, Jared caught Marla's eye. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You reminded me what this place can be." She smiled. "Just doing my job, Mr. Wilson." He nodded, but as he walked out, he knew the real work was just beginning, and the next move would show how deep the fight for justice would go. _______________________ Jared Wilson stepped out of the break room of Wilson Home Goods, the echo of his words still hanging in the air. The staff dispersed in silence, their faces a mix of shock, shame, and something else, maybe a flicker of understanding. The Dallas store felt different now, its polished surface cracked open to reveal the flaws beneath. Jared's hands trembled slightly as he pulled his cap back on, not from fear, but from the weight of what he'd just set in motion. He'd faced them down, Tyler, Andy, Kate, Jack, and laid bare the truth. But calling out the problem wasn't enough. He needed to fix it, root and branch, and that meant turning his anger into action. He lingered near the checkout, watching Marla ring up a customer with her usual grace. She caught his eye and offered a small, steady smile, a lifeline in the chaos. Jared nodded back, then headed to his truck, the afternoon heat pressing against him like a challenge. Inside, he pulled out his phone and dialed his operations director, Lisa, a no-nonsense woman who'd been with him since the early days. "Lisa, it's Jared," he said, skipping pleasantries. "We've got a problem. I went undercover at Dallas today, and it's bad. Bias, disrespect, the works. We're rolling out mandatory training across every store. Sensitivity, service, accountability. Start next week. And I want unannounced visits scheduled. I'm not letting this fester." Lisa's voice crackled through, sharp and focused. "Got it. How deep are we going?" Jared stared at the store's logo through the windshield. "All the way." and set up an anonymous feedback line, staff and customers. I need to know what's really happening out there. She paused, then said, "You sound pissed. You okay?" He exhaled. "I will be. Just get it done." He hung up, the plan taking shape. This wasn't a bandage. It was a rebuild. Back inside, Jared found Jack in the manager's office, hunched over paperwork, his face still flushed from the meeting. "Jack," Jared said, leaning against the doorframe. "Tyler's out." Document his attitude, the customer complaints. "I saw 3 in the log from last month alone. It's enough to cut him loose, clean, and legal." Jack nodded, avoiding eye contact. "And Andy and Kate, written warnings. They're on probation. One more slip, they're gone. You're in charge of enforcing it." Jack looked up, hesitant. "Mr. Wilson, I'm sorry about earlier." "I didn't mean," Jared cut him off. "I know, but sorry doesn't fix it. Results do. Step up, or I'll find someone who will." By Monday, Tyler was gone, his termination processed with a paper trail that left no room for debate. Andy and Kate stayed, their warnings pinned to their files, their smirks replaced by nervous glances. The first training session rolled out a week later. 2 hours of real talk about bias, respect, and the cost of screwing up. Jared sat in on it, front row, his presence a quiet promise. This wasn't optional. Employees squirmed at first, but by the end, some nodded, others asked questions. Change wasn't instant, but it was starting. Marla became his unexpected ally. Jared pulled her aside after a shift. "Marla, I need someone I can trust. You're good at this, better than most. I'm making you point person for staff feedback. Anything they're scared to say to me, they tell you." "Deal." Her eyes widened, then softened. "Deal, Mr. Wilson. I just want this place to feel right again." He smiled, a real one this time. "It will, thanks to people like you." Weeks passed, and the Dallas store shifted. Complaints dropped, slowly but noticeably. Customers lingered longer, their smiles less forced. Jared made good on his promise, popping into stores across Texas unannounced, cap on, eyes sharp. He caught slip-ups, a curt cashier here, a lazy stalker there, but the tide was turning. The anonymous line buzzed with tips, a manager in Austin cutting corners, a clerk in Houston shining bright. Jared acted on every one, firing when needed, praising when earned. Accountability wasn't a threat, it was a culture. One evening, he stood outside the Dallas store at dusk, the sky streaked orange and pink. A family walked out, laughing, their cart full. An older man thanked Marla at the door, his voice carrying. Jared's chest loosened, just a fraction. This was what he'd fought for. Not perfection, but progress. He thought back to that Saturday, the sting of being dismissed in his own creation. It still hurt, but it had lit a fire. He'd faced the ugly truth and turned it into something better. Driving home, Jared replayed his final words to the staff. "We're not done. This is day one." He meant it. Justice wasn't a moment. It was a promise kept, step by step. The rot was being dug out, and in its place, something stronger was growing. He'd started this company to prove every person mattered, and now he'd spend every day making damn sure it stayed that way.